The last one is the language cultural connection. Okay, so when you're teaching the English language, you're also teaching the culture of the language, right? This is very true because you cannot run away from the values, the way of thinking, and so on. All right. So the cultural connection is a very sensitive one. All right. I have been to schools where students don't want to learn English language because they are scared that their culture is going to be uh, altered. All right. This is something that you will see in some of the schools, especially, not only classes, but the entire school will have that similar culture. They are scared to learn any other language because they are scared that the influence of that culture will come in. All right, no doubt we will learn about the culture, but it doesn't mean that we have to change ourselves, right? We are just learning and being aware of what other people experience, but we don't have to change and behave like them. All right. So I think that has to be said in a very subtle way. You can't tell them directly. Okay. So when we do this, all right, if you are not used to it, if you are not aware of the culture, then the connection is lesser. So connections lesser means less meaningful. Right? When it's not meaningful, then whatever you teach doesn't make sense to them. Right? So what we should do is, I think the textbooks are great because the textbooks are all British textbooks. So there's a lot of things that are said. For example, if I can remember one of the lessons, it's about listening audio, where there, there is this marketplace. I can't remember exactly where it is. I think in London or somewhere. And they talk about what they have in the marketplace. All right. As compared to, I think you can relate that to our pasar malam. All right, where you have food, things sold. They have like mementos, all right? Uh, yeah, a lot more things. So how do and then there's this flea market. So the culture is different, but you can make that connection trying to relate to something they already know. Okay, now what's the difference between pasar malam and pasar minggu? Is there any difference?
I
I
think
think yes.
Pasar Minggu is like
I think in my
in the morning,
place,
right?
yeah, meh. Yeah, but it happens during the weekend. Kan? Oh.
Okay, all right. So do they sell the same thing?
No,
Likely.
no
Okay, so
lah.
pasar malam would be a place where you have food, clothes, vegetables. Also, you do have people selling fish and meat. All right, so you have the whole range of things. A pasar minggu, what would be different?
I'm not sure, madam, but here in my place, Pasar Minggu is like we call it Pasar Tani.
Mhm.
It happens in the morning. They sell like vegetables, meat, fish like that. But then Pasar Malam, they sell food, clothes, not macam barang basah no.
Okay. All right. So there is a little bit of difference, right? Okay. So the flea market would not have all the meat and vegetables sold, but you might have fruits. Okay. So
Right.
that is a little different from our culture, because in our culture, I think selling meat and fish in a pasar malam or a pasar minggu, it is maybe pasar minggu not so much, but pasar malam is normal, because we do get in the markets, we actually buy these things. All right. But in many of the Western countries, the wet market is very rare. So a lot of meat is found only in frozen forms. All right. The fresh market may be very far away from where it is sold. So that is also a cultural difference, because we have a wet market practically in every other uh, town. It doesn't even have to be a big town. Even a small town would have a wet market. You may not have a building, but you would have people selling fish and all that on the roadside, for example. All right. So this language culture connection is also important in the affective domain, because this is more it's related to how you feel about the language. All right. So we can't run away from it, but it doesn't mean that you have to influence and change your values. That's what you need to remind your students. Right? If they are afraid of learning the language because then they will behave like a matsale, that's not going to happen unless you make it happen, isn't it? You are in charge of your life. How can a book change your life unless you allow it to? Okay, so that has to be reminded, because I've seen this happen not only in one school, but at least 10 schools, 10 different schools I've been to. The trainees will always complain about this. Right? Sometimes it's not the whole school, it's just one class, a group of students, so that can be an issue as well. All right. I'll just continue. If you need to take a break, you can just take a short break in between. All right. But I'll continue until the last part, and then we'll take a break afterwards. Is that okay? Right. So, what should a teacher
Yes.
do? Discuss cross-cultural differences and respect, provide activities that illustrate connection between language and culture, teach your students the culture connotations, especially the sociolinguistics of the language, screen your techniques for materials that may be culturally offensive. For example, like I think we had seen some examples in the grammar class. Some of the activities, exercises, like there's this, um, I remember something about drinking wine, all right? And it can be culturally offensive in some cultures, like if you talk about alcoholic drinks. So that needs a bit of sensitivity, especially for school students. All right, when you talk about LGBT, for example, because when you take materials from the internet, LGBT is actually discussed in depth at a younger age in many of the Western countries. But in our country, do we talk about it?
No.
Never in school. All right. So we need to screen our materials as well in that sense. All right. For adult students, it's fine, because when you talk about it, you're actually showing the differences, and students can argue for and against it. Right? But when they are younger, there's also this issue of influence and how much you're influenced of that material. So that makes a difference. Okay, help students to be aware of acculturation and its stages. All right. Sometimes it's just shocking. Sometimes it's acceptable, right? Because of the cultural difference, right? Okay. So